Welcome back to OpenLine. Tonight we are bringing you up to speed on what happened in the courtroom for day one of the Vanderbilt rape retrial of Brandon Vandenberg. We've seen a little portion of the prosecution's opening statements, and we want to rejoin that to get the rest.
So he has covered up a surveillance camera that does show the hall with a towel, and you'll see him doing it so that he can attempt to get her out the side door without it being shown on a surveillance camera. So he doesn't know what to do now. He's there by himself. So he calls up one of his friends, Dylan Vanderwall, who was a tight end also, was in his position group, so he knew him. Doesn't get him, so he calls Chris Boyd. Chris Boyd was a senior star player on the team and kind of a team leader. So he calls Mr. Boyd. Now during this incident, when he's recording this, he's not only recording it, he's sending it out to people. He sends 6 videos out. He's got 2 good friends in California, Mr. Quizino and Mr. Finley. He sends in the videos. And he sends Mr. Boyd one of the videos. And he sends Austin Carter Samuels, who's the quarterback, one of the videos. Now, Boyd and Mr. Carter Samuels are over in another dorm. So once he calls Mr. Boyd then gathers up some folks, Mr. Retta, and gets Dylan Vanderwall up, and they all go over to assist him. And they pick up a person named DeAndre Woods that you'll hear from, who's also on the football team, and they all go up to see what's going on. And at that time, I think Mr. Vandenberg shows one of the videos to someone in the hall. They're discussing what to do. They then decide to put back in the room on the bed and leave her there, which they do. Unconscious. And Mr. Prelude's had enough. He's laid up there and he's listened to this stuff. He's seen some of it. And he's out and he jumps down and he's gone too. So they leave her in there alone by herself. And they walk back over to the other dorm so Mr. Vandenberg can spend the night with Vanderwall because he doesn't want to be in there because she threw up in the rooms. And on the way back, Mr. Vandenberg tells some people as he's talking, as he's walking back over there, that he wanted to have sex with her, but he was too high, couldn't get an erection. That 2 of the other individuals had sex with her, that a bottle was used on her, and that he got rid of the condoms. So they go back and you'll see some surveillance video. They talk about what's going to happen. The next morning, Mr. Vandenberg gets up and goes to breakfast. He meets Mr. Vanderwall for breakfast. And the group is now starting to worry. Mr. Boyd's trying to do something as a team leader to maybe contain this situation of what's going on. So there's talk that you'll see some texts that went back and forth between certain parties involved in this as they attempt to cover this up and make sure they get away with it. And Mr. Vandenberg has a discussion, and they decide that the best thing Mr. Vandenberg could do is go over and be really nice, be really nice to her, find out if she remembers anything, and try to have sex with her to cover up any evidence that was left from the attack. And that's what he does. He calls up, still not feeling great, he's embarrassed. He tells her about how she got so sick and threw up on him, and he was so nice to her and how he took care of her and everything. But, you know, he doesn't hold it against her. He's so nice to her. And then he makes this move, and they actually have sex, unprotected, even though there's condoms right there in his room. He has unprotected sex to cover up the crime. She never sees him again, although there is some text messages back and forth. And they almost got away with it. Almost. But there had been an act of vandalism at that dorm that night. So Vanderbilt security was looking at surveillance video to determine what happened and see if they could figure out who did the damage there in the dorm. And what they saw was Mr. Vandenberg and Mr. Banks dropping, obviously unconscious in the floor, taking inappropriate pictures of her, and then see this group taking her around to go into a room. Well, obviously that raised concern with the Vanderbilt authorities. And they actually called individuals in to question them, and they questioned Mr. Vanderbilt. He told them, oh, nothing happened. We just took her up to the room. She was really drunk, and I was just taking care of her. We took her up there, and nothing happened. We talked about football. And no, nobody touched her. No, there were no videos or photographs taken. No, nothing happened. Nothing at all. He did a written statement and a tape statement telling that to Vanderbilt authorities. Well, Vanderbilt authorities are pretty concerned by now. They contact the police department. But by now it's the 27th. It's 4 days after this, which is a problem, obviously, in an investigation like this. And the police come to Vanderbilt, and they review some of the still shots of the surveillance video and see who was possibly involved in this. And then their next step is to interview people. And they interview Mr. Vandenberg first. And you'll listen to that interview, and he'll tell the police, oh, nothing happened. No, nobody did anything to her. I was just taking care of her. Just being a good guy. She was really drunk and, you know, throwing up, and I was just taking care of her. Nothing happened. We talked about football, and, you know, and they left. And, no, nothing really happened. But then the police started doing what they do. They started saying, well, you know, we may find this, and we may sign that. And they're trying to get to Mr. Vandenberg, say, you know, we know you're a nice guy and you've got a conscience. And they start putting some pressure, I guess, subtle psychological pressure on Mr. Vandenberg, and he's trying to figure out, you know, what they know, what they can find out. So he finally says, okay, you know, I don't trust those 3 guys that were up there. I'm afraid they're going to say something bad about me. I don't trust them. Then he says, okay, I'll tell you. They came in and they were fingering her and stuff, and they were slapping her on the butt. And I heard them having sex with her. They were turning the lights on and off, and it was horrible. I should have done something about it. I didn't. I didn't do anything about it. But it was those guys. But then he says, oh, and by the way, I did take a video of it. And another thing, you know, by the way, I did go out and cover up her surveillance camera. And by the way, I did go flush the condoms down the toilet. And by the way, I did go over and have sex with her to try to cover her up after talking to those guys. That we decided that's what I needed to do. But I didn't touch her in that room. I sat on the bed. So that's his statement to the police, which you'll hear. The police, after that, they bring in experts to come in, forensic experts to come in and do what's called ID. And they'll come in, you'll see photographs of the room, you'll see what's called a panoscan, which you put in there and you can actually scan around the room like you're standing there, and you'll see how small it is. And they collected some evidence. They didn't know exactly what they were dealing with at the time. They collected towels, sheets, things of that nature. Took fingerprints on certain items. And you'll hear their testimony about what they collected. You'll hear some DNA testimony, although because of the lateness of the reports of the police, it was really difficult to get DNA evidence from the victim. And you'll hear about that. But you'll hear that they then talked to Miss, that they'd already seized the cell phones and the computer from Mr. Vandenberg at that time. Actually, they took his statement. They seized cell phones from all the defendants, Mr. Vandenberg's computer. They then call in to talk to her. Now, she still has no idea what's happened to her. And she tells the police a statement told to her by Mr. Vandenberg. Oh, I must have got really drunk. I'm sick. She just tells them exactly what Mr. Vandenberg told her happened that night when he came over. And her greatest concern is for Mr. Vandenberg. Concern he might get thrown off the football team or something of that nature. And you'll see the text messages back and forth. And they want her to do what's called a forensic rape kit, which means you're examined by a forensic examiner nurse, and they take samples from you. And she knew from talking to that it probably was worthless to do that because of the 90-something hours since the attack. And obviously, she'd showered and done things like that. But she finally agreed reluctantly to do it. And you'll hear the testimony from the nurse practitioner that did that. She'll describe what various injuries she saw. And she did a vaginal swab. And you'll hear the DNA expert from the TBI testify. Vaginal swab did find a semen from Mr. Vandenberg from what happened the next day. And they did collect some clothes later that she thought she was wearing that night had been thrown in the clothes hamper. They were taken for testing. They tested some towels and things of that nature. And you'll hear some testimony about touch DNA and transfer DNA and things of that nature. You'll also hear from a fingerprint expert, Julia Hooper. Ms. Hooper is going to tell you that she found 3 fingerprints on condoms, which I think testimony will show belonged to Mr. Vandenberg. One was smudged. She couldn't make an identification on it, but she did identify Mr. McKenzie's fingerprint and Mr. Banks' fingerprint on those condoms that were found in Mr. Vandenberg's room. And you're going to hear from the police forensic analysis detective, Chad Gish, about he did a forensic analysis on each phone. And you're going to see photographs that he recovered from Mr. Vandenberg's phone, Mr. Beatty's phone, Mr. Banks' phone. He didn't recover any from Mr. McKenzie's phone. You'll see those photographs, and they'll try to illustrate what went on over this period of time. You'll see different positions, different clothes on and off, different things being done to her in the photographs. It won't be pleasant to look at, but they will show. We'll never know everything that happened in that room for 30 minutes, but they'll show a lot of what happened. You'll also find that the analysis done on Mr. Vandenberg's computer showed that during the time frame of the attack that he was visiting various porno sites. You'll also find that he searched, prior to talking to the police, whether the police could find deleted videos. So he knew it was possible to find those when he reported to the police that he'd taken a video. And you'll find he also did a search on rape statutes in Tennessee. That was on the computer. Police then knew that he had sent these videos out to Mr. Quizno, Mr. Finley. So in July, they go out to get their phones to do an analysis on them. And when they get there, they don't have their phones. Mr. Vandenberg has been there and destroyed their phones. And also, Mr. Quizno had an iPhone which synced to his computer. Mr. Vandenberg knew that. He brought a program over to erase the hard drive and ran the program on his computer. Luckily, it didn't work totally. Police got a search warrant, got that computer. Detective Gish will tell you that he found 3 video files, very brief video files, a minute and something total of the 6 that were sent. And you'll have to watch those. And in those, you'll see aggravated rape being committed by Mr. Banks and Mr. Beatty. And you'll hear this defendant, Mr. Vandenberg, as he's filming it, laughing and saying, "Squeeze that thing, squeeze that thing, squeeze that thing. You ain't even hard, dude." Taunting her, "Do you want to go back to the tin room? Want to go back to the tin room?" Laughing. That's the proof you'll hear from the state of Tennessee. After hearing that proof, there'll be no doubt this defendant is guilty of each count of this indictment. 5 counts of aggravated rape, 2 counts of aggravated sexual battery, and then disseminating these pictures in the worst moment of her life. You'll find not only he violated the laws of Tennessee, but the very laws of human decency. Thank you.